He thought it was just another day in the shelter kitchen, cooking with broken equipment, dented cans, and a prayer. But one bowl of his gumbo stopped a world-class chef in her tracks right there. She begged him to work in her restaurant. It should have been the break of a lifetime, until his past came back to haunt him. A jealous rival tried to destroy his name, and someone he loved most threatened to take away the only family he had left. Now, with everything on the line, his daughter, his reputation, and the people who depend on his cooking, he has one chance to prove that what he serves isn't just food, it's hope. But when the kitchen doors swing open, will this father's gift lift him higher than he's ever dreamed or burn everything he's fought for to the ground? Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you are watching from today. The ancient stove at St. Bridget's shelter had seen better days. Its burners were perpetually uneven, the temperature gauge hadn't worked right since last Christmas, and the pilot light needed daily sweet-talking. But today, in the middle of Veterans Outreach lunch service, it decided to make its final statement with a loud pop that echoed through the kitchen like a firecracker. Malik Turner froze mid-stir, wooden spoon hovering over a half-empty pot. The flame beneath it flickered and died, leaving nothing but the smell of gas and defeat. His heart sank as he tried the knobs one by one. Nothing. Not even a spark. "Come on, old friend," he muttered, giving the stove a gentle pat. Not today. Through the service window, he could see the dining hall packed with elderly veterans, their conversations mixing with the clinking of utensils against worn plastic trays. Only half the people had been served, and hungry faces kept glancing his way expectantly. Gus Whitfield, wearing his trademark faded Vietnam veteran cap, leaned through the window with a crooked grin. "Kitchen giving you trouble, son? Better pull a rabbit out of your hat quick. Got some mighty hungry soldiers out here." Malik wiped his hands on his apron and took a deep breath. "Guess I'll have to work some magic then, Gus." He surveyed his kingdom of dented cans and rescued produce, mind already calculating possibilities. The morning's delivery from the food bank had brought some wilted collard greens that still had life in them, a bag of rice that was just enough, and various canned goods that most people would overlook. In the corner sat the shelter's emergency propane burner, a backup he'd never thought he'd need. "Sister Alma," he called out to the elderly nun who helped manage the shelter. "Could you grab that outdoor burner from the storage room?" While she hustled to help, Malik's hands moved with practiced efficiency. He pulled ingredients from the shelves, canned tomatoes, beans, some frozen okra he'd been saving for a special occasion. A quick check of his spice shelf revealed just enough thyme, his secret weapon for making simple dishes taste like home. "What's the verdict, chef?" Gus asked, still watching through the window. "How do you feel about gumbo today?" Malik's voice carried a confidence he wasn't entirely sure he felt. Gus's eyes lit up. "Now that's what I call turning trouble into treasure." Sister Alma returned with the propane burner, and Malik set it up with swift precision. His knife moved in a blur, transforming the wilted greens into neat ribbons, dicing onions and celery that had seen better days into perfect squares. Every ingredient got a second chance in his kitchen. The makeshift setup wasn't ideal, but Malik had learned long ago that love could season any meal better than salt. He started with a roux, carefully stirring flour and oil until it turned the color of chocolate. The sweet, nutty smell began to fill the kitchen, drawing curious faces to the service window. "That's looking mighty fine," Gus commented, watching Malik work. "Reminds me of what we used to do in the field. Making something out of nothing." Malik nodded, adding the vegetables to the pot. "Sometimes that's all you can do, right? Work with what you've got." The gumbo came together like a small miracle. The tomatoes broke down into the broth, the beans added heartiness, and the okra thickened everything just right. Malik stirred in the thyme last, letting its fragrance rise with the steam. Each step was a prayer of sorts, for the food to stretch, for it to satisfy, for it to bring some comfort to people who'd seen harder days than most. As the gumbo simmered, Malik began serving it over small portions of rice, making sure every bowl got a fair share of vegetables and broth. The first bowl went to Gus, who had earned his taste tester status through years of honest feedback and unwavering support. Gus took a spoonful and closed his eyes. "Now that's what I call turning lemons into lemonade, son. Or better yet, turning broken into blessed." The other veterans received their bowls with grateful nods and warm smiles. The dining hall filled with the sounds of appreciation, spoons scraping bowls clean, satisfied sighs, and the kind of comfortable silence that only comes with good food. Malik watched them eat, his own stomach empty but his heart full. Some were trading stories between bites, others savoring each spoonful like it was their last. A few of the older vets were even teaching younger shelter residents the proper way to eat gumbo, rice first, then the broth, letting each bite tell its own story. From his spot behind the counter, Malik offered up a quiet prayer. Not for himself, but for something better for all of them, the veterans who'd given so much, the shelter that did what it could with so little, and yes, maybe even for that old stove that had finally given up the ghost. Sister Alma appeared at his side, reaching up to squeeze his shoulder. "You did good, Malik. Real good." "Just trying to keep our promise," he replied softly. "Nobody goes hungry here." The lunch rush continued, but now with laughter and contentment, instead of worried faces. Gus had started telling one of his famous war stories, gesturing with his spoon for emphasis, his bowl already scraped clean. Others were asking for seconds, which Malik carefully portioned out to make sure everyone got enough. Through it all, that single propane burner kept firing, its blue flame steady and true. The gumbo pot was nearly empty now, but every person in the dining hall had a full belly and a warm smile. Some were even licking their spoons, trying to catch every last drop of the improvised meal. Looking out at the scene before him, Malik felt a familiar warmth in his chest that had nothing to do with the kitchen's heat. This was why he cooked. Not for praise or profit, but for moments like these, when food could transform a potential crisis into a celebration of community. Malik was scraping the bottom of the gumbo pot when Sister Alma's familiar footsteps echoed through the kitchen doorway. He looked up, ready to give her his usual end-of-service report, but the words died in his throat. She wasn't alone. Two strangers followed behind her. A man in an expensive-looking gray suit who seemed to be taking mental notes of everything around him, and a tall woman wearing a pristine white chef's coat. The woman's presence commanded attention, her posture speaking of years spent ruling professional kitchens. "Malik," Sister Alma said, her voice carrying a hint of excitement she was trying to contain. "We have some visitors who'd like to see our kitchen." The woman stepped forward, her eyes already scanning the makeshift cooking station and the nearly empty pot. Her gaze was sharp, professional, taking in every detail. Despite her elegant appearance, there was something approachable in the way she carried herself. "I'm Chef Isabelle Marchand," she said, her French accent warm and precise. "Sister Alma was just telling us about your emergency adaptation today." Malik wiped his hands on his apron, suddenly aware of how humble everything must look to someone like her. The propane burner, the dented cans still sitting on the prep table, the worn-out utensils, it was a far cry from the kind of kitchen someone of her caliber would be used to. "Just trying to make sure everyone gets fed," he said simply. The man in the suit, clearly some kind of donor or inspector, was examining the broken stove with a frown, but Chef Marchand's attention remained fixed on the gumbo pot. "May I?" she asked, gesturing to the ladle. Malik nodded, stepping aside as she approached. She picked up the ladle with the practiced grace of someone who had tasted thousands of dishes in her career. The dining hall had grown quieter, everyone watching this unexpected scene unfold. Chef Marchand lifted the ladle to her lips and tasted. For a moment, she stood perfectly still, eyes closed. When she opened them again, they were shining with what looked suspiciously like tears. "Mon Dieu," she whispered. Then louder, "This roux, it's perfect. The balance of the thyme with the..." She took another taste. "You made this on an emergency burner with rescued ingredients?" Malik nodded again, unsure how to respond to the emotion in her voice. Had to work with what we had. Non, she said, shaking her head. This isn't just working with what you had. This is. She turned to the man in the suit. David, taste this. The man, David, looked surprised, but obliged. His eyebrows shot up as he tasted the gumbo. Well, I'll be damned, he muttered. Chef Marchand was already moving, examining the prep area, looking at how Malik had organized his workspace. These knife cuts, even on less than perfect vegetables, they're precise. And this setup, she gestured to how he had arranged his ingredients and tools. This is professional technique. Where did you train? Started culinary school, Malik admitted. Couldn't finish, but you kept learning, she finished for him, nodding as if something had been confirmed. It shows. The foundation is there, but this. She lifted the ladle again. This kind of cooking comes from something deeper than school. Sister Alma was beaming now, her earlier attempt at containing her excitement forgotten. Malik keeps this place running on miracles and love, she said proudly. Not miracles, Malik corrected gently. Just trying to make sure nobody goes hungry. That's exactly what I'm looking for, Chef Marchand said, her voice taking on a decisive tone. She turned to face him fully. I'm opening a new restaurant. Something different, not just another temple to fine dining, but a place that remembers what food is really about. Community, connection, making sure nobody goes hungry. The dining hall had gone completely silent now. Even Gus, usually ready with a quip, was watching intently from his usual spot by the window. Chef Marchand's eyes were bright with purpose. I've been looking for the right chef to help lead this project. Someone who understands both technique and heart. Someone who can make magic happen even when everything goes wrong. She gestured at the broken stove, the emergency burner, the empty gumbo pot that had somehow fed dozens. Someone exactly like you. Malik felt his heart skip a beat. I'm not sure Let me be clear, she interrupted, her voice carrying through the quiet kitchen. I'm not offering charity. I'm not doing anyone a favor. I need you in my kitchen. She glanced at her watch, then back at him with a smile. Tonight, if possible. The whole dining hall erupted in applause and cheers. Sister Alma was dabbing at her eyes with the corner of her apron. Gus was grinning like he'd just won the lottery himself. Through the commotion, Malik stood still, his mind racing with possibilities and responsibilities. The lunch crowd had thinned out, leaving behind empty bowls and the lingering scent of gumbo in the air. Malik sat at a small corner table with Chef Isabelle Marchand, his hands wrapped around a cup of coffee that Sister Alma had insisted on serving them. The coffee was nothing fancy, just the regular shelter brew, but Chef Marchand sipped it with the same appreciation she'd shown for his gumbo. Please, call me Isabelle, she said, setting down her cup. If we're going to work together, we should skip the formalities. Malik nodded, still trying to process everything that had happened in the last hour. The broken stove, the improvised lunch, and now this renowned chef sitting across from him, talking about opportunities he'd long ago filed away as impossible dreams. The concept is simple, Isabelle continued, her hands moving expressively as she spoke. Fine dining with a conscience. We'll serve 2 menus side by side, one prix fixe for those who can afford it, helping to subsidize a community menu that makes good food accessible to everyone. She pulled out a small notebook, flipping it open to reveal sketches and notes. The space is already secured, an old warehouse with good bones. 2 floors, with the main dining room upstairs and a community kitchen on the ground level. Her finger traced along a rough floor plan. We'll have a teaching kitchen, space for community events, cooking classes. It sounds amazing, Malik said honestly. And it did. It sounded like everything he'd ever wanted to do with food, everything he believed in. The salary would be competitive, of course, Isabelle added, naming a figure that made Malik's coffee cup pause halfway to his lips. Plus benefits, healthcare, the whole package. And creative freedom. I want your voice in this kitchen, your vision. Malik set his cup down carefully. I need to be upfront with you, he said. I have an 8-year-old daughter, Ava. She's my whole world and she comes first. Always. Isabel's face softened. Of course, family should always come first. The night shifts, Malik continued. They're complicated. Right now, I can make dinner service work here at the shelter because Sister Alma helps watch Ava, and she can do her homework in the office. But a restaurant schedule. We'll find a way, Isabel said firmly. Maybe we start with you in research and development, working on menus during the day. Maybe we look at early dinner service only. She leaned forward. Listen, Malik. What I tasted today, that gumbo you made from next to nothing, that's not just cooking. That's alchemy. That's exactly the kind of food, the kind of heart I want in this project. A warm afternoon sun filtered through the shelter's windows, casting long shadows across their table. In the kitchen, the volunteers were starting cleanup, the familiar clatter of dishes and quiet conversation creating a rhythm Malik knew by heart. I've worked in some of the best kitchens in the world, Isabel continued. Places where people fight for reservations months in advance, where every plate is a work of art. But something's always been missing. She gestured around the shelter dining room. This understanding that food is about more than perfection, it's about feeding people, about making them feel seen and cared for. Malik thought about the veterans who came through their doors, about Gus and his stories, about Sister Alma's tireless dedication. He thought about Ava doing her homework in the corner, drawing little pictures on her math worksheets and chatting with the regulars who'd become like family. Can I think about it? He asked. Talk it over with my daughter? Of course, Isabel said, pulling out a business card. Take the weekend. But Malik. She waited until he met her eyes. Don't let fear of change stop you from growing. Sometimes the best way to keep serving others is to let yourself rise. After finishing at the shelter, Malik walked the familiar route to Ava's school. The autumn air was crisp, carrying the scent of fallen leaves and possibility. He found himself rehearsing different ways to tell her about the offer, wondering how much an 8-year-old could understand about life-changing moments. Ava was sitting on the school steps when he arrived, her backpack covered in the buttons and patches she loved collecting. Her face lit up when she saw him. It always did, no matter how many times he picked her up, and she ran to him with her usual enthusiasm. Daddy, she crashed into him with a hug. We learned about fractions today using pizza slices, and Miss Thompson said my story about the cooking princess was the most creative in class. That's great, sweet pea, Malik said, taking her backpack as they started walking home. Actually, something pretty interesting happened at the shelter today. Did Gus tell another one of his sailor stories? Ava asked hopefully. She loved the old veterans' tales, even though Malik was pretty sure half of them were embellished. Not today. But you remember how the big stove broke down? Ava nodded. Sister Alma texted me about it. She said you made magic happen anyway. Well, there was this chef who visited, a really famous one named Isabelle Marchand. She tasted the food I made and… Malik paused, watching his daughter's expressive face. She offered me a job at her new restaurant. Ava stopped walking, her eyes going wide. A real restaurant? Like the fancy ones we see on TV? Even fancier, Malik said. But different too. The kind where we'd help feed people who need it, just like at the shelter. Would you get to wear one of those tall white hats? Ava asked, bouncing a little with excitement. Malik laughed. Maybe, but it would mean some changes for us. I'd have to learn new things, work different hours sometimes. Would we have to move? Ava's voice held a touch of worry now. No, baby, we'd stay right here in our apartment, and I'd still be able to pick you up from school most days. Ava's face scrunched up in thought, a look Malik recognized from when she was working out a particularly challenging math problem. Then her eyes lit up again, hope blooming across her features. Could I still come help sometimes? Like I do at the shelter? I'm sure we could work something out, Malik said, his heart swelling with love for this little girl who always thought of others. Chef Isabel seems like the kind of person who understands about family. The morning sun filtered through the shelter kitchen's small window as Malik chopped vegetables for the day's lunch service. His phone buzzed in his pocket. An unknown number. He wiped his hands on his apron and answered. "Mr. Turner, this is Dana Wright, Chef Marchand's assistant," a crisp voice said. "Do you have a moment to discuss your background check results?" Malik's knife paused mid-slice through a carrot. "Of course," he said, keeping his voice steady despite the sudden tightness in his chest. "I need to verify some information," Dana continued. "There's a record here from 8 years ago at LeCordon Institute. An altercation with a kitchen manager?" The memory hit Malik like a splash of hot oil. The fluorescent lights of that student kitchen, the sneer on Manager Peterson's face as he'd watched Malik plate his grandmother's recipe for braised oxtail. "That was a long time ago," Malik said quietly, moving away from where Sister Alma was sorting through donation boxes. "The charges were dropped." "Yes, I can see that," Dana replied. "But we need you to explain what happened. Chef Marchand is very particular about her kitchen team's history." Malik closed his eyes, the scene playing out in his mind like a worn videotape. He'd been 2 months away from graduating. Peterson had been writing him all semester, making snide comments about hood food and mocking the way Malik would code switch between proper culinary terms and his natural speaking voice. It was near the end of the semester, Malik explained, his voice low. Peterson, the kitchen manager, he'd been difficult. That day, he called my food ghetto slop in front of the whole class, said I was trying to turn his kitchen into a street corner operation. He heard Dana's sharp intake of breath. I'd kept quiet through all his comments before that. Malik continued. But something snapped. I got in his face. He shoved me. I shoved back. A pot got knocked over. Security came. The report mentions you were defending another student as well. Yeah, Sarah Chen. Peterson had been giving her grief too, making comments about authentic Chinese cooking. Said her family's recipes weren't refined enough. There was a pause, filled with the sound of typing. And the charges were dropped because? Other students came forward, told the administration about Peterson's pattern of behavior. He'd been doing it for years, targeting students of color. They fired him, but Malik's voice trailed off. But the arrest record remained, Dana finished. Yes, ma'am. More typing. I see here you left the program shortly after. Malik's throat tightened. That had been when Marie got sick. The medical bills, the chemotherapy, trying to care for baby Ava, staying in school, had become impossible. Family emergency, he said simply. Had to take care of my daughter. I understand, Dana said, her voice softening slightly. I'll need to discuss this with Chef Marchand. She'll want to review everything personally. After hanging up, Malik stared at the half-chopped vegetables on his cutting board. The morning light seemed dimmer now, the kitchen colder. Sister Alma appeared at his elbow, concern etched on her face. Bad news? She asked gently. Maybe, Malik said. Past catching up, I guess. Sister Alma squeezed his arm. The past only has the power we give it, child. But later that afternoon, when the thick manila envelope arrived by courier, the past felt plenty powerful. Malik sat at his small kitchen table at home, Ava's drawings decorating the fridge behind him, and stared at the background check report. The clinical language reduced that day to cold facts. Date. Location. Charges filed. Charges dropped. But it couldn't capture the humiliation, the fury, the way his hands had shaken as he'd walked out of that kitchen for the last time. It couldn't show how he'd struggled with the decision to leave school, watching his dreams of a chef's coat and his own restaurant fade while he learned to be both mother and father to Ava. The report lay on the table like a judgment, each typed line a reminder of what he'd lost and what he might lose again. 8 years of building a new life, of finding purpose in the shelter kitchen, of showing Ava that dignity and service could go hand in hand, all of it threatened by 5 minutes of anger from his past. He ran his finger over the embossed letterhead of the background check company, feeling the weight of those old choices pressing down on him like a heavy pot he couldn't quite lift. The test kitchen gleamed like a jewelry store, all polished steel and pristine white surfaces. Malik stood in the doorway, taking in the sight of equipment that probably cost more than his yearly salary at the shelter. Industrial mixers lined one wall, their chrome bodies reflecting the bright overhead lights. The air smelled of fresh bread and something delicate, maybe saffron. Isabel waved him in from her spot at a central workstation. "Malik, right on time, come." Her enthusiasm filled the space, making it feel warmer somehow. She wore her chef's whites like armor, crisp and authoritative, but her smile was genuine. "Thank you for having me," Malik said, stepping carefully across the immaculate floor. He'd polished his work shoes, but they still showed their age. "I want you to meet someone crucial to our operation." Isabel gestured to a man bent over a cutting board, his knife moving in precise, measured strokes. "This is Dorian Pike, my sous chef for the past 3 years." Dorian looked up, his movements deliberately slow as he set down his knife and wiped his hands. "Ah, the shelter cook." He extended his hand with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "I've heard so much about you." Malik shook the offered hand firmly. "Good things, I hope." "Interesting things," Dorian replied, his accent clipped and precise. "That gumbo story is quite charming, though I imagine we'll be working with slightly better ingredients here." He glanced at Malik's worn chef's coat. Isabel pulled out a stack of papers. "I've been thinking about the opening menu. Malik, your ideas about community-inspired dishes, I'd love to hear more." Before Malik could respond, Dorian cleared his throat. "Chef, perhaps we should discuss the classical foundations first? Our clientele will expect certain standards." "Standards are important," Malik agreed carefully. "But sometimes innovation comes from unexpected places." "Indeed." Dorian's smile tightened. "And where did you study these classical foundations? Le Cordon, perhaps? The CIA?" The question hung in the air like smoke. Malik kept his expression neutral, though his shoulders tensed slightly. "I attended culinary school for a time. Life had other plans." "Ah." Dorian turned to Isabel. "Chef, about that sauce we discussed? The one with the aged Madeira? I've refined it further." He moved to a small saucepan, effectively dismissing Malik from the conversation. Isabel frowned. "Dorian, we're in the middle of—" "No, please," Malik said smoothly. "I'd love to taste it. Learning is always valuable." Dorian ladled a small amount onto a tasting spoon with flourish. The sauce was a deep mahogany, glossy and perfect. "Notice the viscosity," he said, as if lecturing a student. "This is what years of proper technique produces." Malik tasted it carefully. The flavor was complex, beautifully balanced. "It's excellent," he said honestly. "Reminds me of my grandmother's gravy, though she used coffee instead of Madeira." Dorian's eyebrows shot up. "Coffee? In a classical sauce?" "Different roads to the same destination," Malik said quietly. "The result is what matters, isn't it?" "The method matters," Dorian corrected, turning back to his workstation. "Technique, training, tradition, these aren't suggestions. They're requirements." He began organizing his tools with precise movements. "But I'm sure your creative approach has its place." Isabel stepped forward. "Malik's approach is exactly why." "Chef," Dorian interrupted smoothly, "the investor meeting is in 20 minutes. Shall I prepare the tasting portions?" Isabel checked her watch and sighed. "Yes, we should get ready." She turned to Malik apologetically. "Can we continue this tomorrow? Same time?" "Of course." Malik smiled, keeping his voice light. "Thank you for having me today." As he walked toward the door, Dorian called after him. "Do try to wear proper whites next time. Presentation matters here." Malik nodded without turning around. He kept his steps measured, his back straight, as he left the gleaming kitchen. Only when he reached his car did he let out a long breath, his hands gripping the steering wheel tightly. The familiar ache of being judged, dismissed, categorized before he could prove himself, It sat heavy in his chest. He glanced at his phone. 2 hours until he needed to pick up Ava from school. Just enough time to prep dinner at the shelter. There, at least, his food spoke for itself, no pedigree required. Starting the car, Malik thought of his grandmother's kitchen, how she'd taught him that love was the finest ingredient, that dignity could be served on any plate. He straightened his shoulders. Tomorrow was another day, another chance to prove that excellence didn't always wear the expected uniform. The doorbell rang just as Malik was helping Ava with her math homework at their small kitchen table. The sound echoed through their modest apartment, making both of them look up from the scattered worksheets and pencils. "Who's that, Daddy?" Ava asked, her pencil pausing mid-equation. "I'm not sure, baby." Malik glanced at the clock. 7:30 p.m. They weren't expecting anyone. When he opened the door, Marla Jennings stood there in her perfectly pressed navy blazer, her silver hair swept into its usual neat bun. Her expression was tight, like she was holding back words that wanted to spill out. "Good evening, Malik." Her tone was clipped, formal. "May I come in?" "Of course." He stepped aside, his stomach nodding. Marla never made surprise visits. Everything with her was scheduled, planned, written in stone. "Grandma!" Ava jumped up from the table, homework forgotten, and ran to hug her grandmother. Marla's face softened as she embraced her granddaughter, though her shoulders remained stiff. "Hello, sweetheart." Marla smoothed Ava's hair. "My, you're getting tall. Are you doing your homework?" "Math," Ava said with a dramatic sigh. "Fractions." "Why don't you finish that up in your room while I talk to your father?" Marla suggested, her eyes meeting Malik's over Ava's head. Malik helped Ava gather her papers. "Good idea, baby. Just a few more problems, okay?" Once Ava had disappeared down the hall, Marla's warmth vanished like sun behind storm clouds. She stood in their living room, examining everything with sharp eyes: the worn couch, the stack of library books on the coffee table, Ava's art projects taped to the walls. "I heard about the restaurant offer," she said finally, turning to face Malik. "Sister Alma mentioned it at church." Malik gestured to the couch. "Would you like to sit? Can I get you some tea?" "No, thank you. This won't take long." She remained standing, her handbag clutched like a shield. "I'm concerned, Malik. Very concerned." "About what exactly?" "About Ava's environment. About her safety." Marla's words came faster now, like she'd been practicing them. "She's growing up in that shelter, surrounded by, well, homeless people. And now you're considering this restaurant job? Late nights? Unstable hours?" "The shelter is perfectly safe," Malik said quietly, keeping his voice level. "And I haven't accepted the position yet. My priority is making sure any arrangement works for Ava." "Is it?" Marla's eyebrows rose. "Because from where I stand, you're exposing my granddaughter to unnecessary risks. She needs stability, structure, a proper home life." The implication hung heavy in the air. Malik's jaw tightened. "She has a proper home life. She's loved, cared for, excelling in school. She falls asleep in church because you keep her at that shelter until all hours." Marla cut in. "She draws pictures of soup kitchens instead of playgrounds. And now you want to add restaurant hours to the mix?" "I'm trying to build a better future for us," Malik said, his hands clenching at his sides. "The shelter work is important, but this opportunity could cost you everything." Marla's voice dropped low, serious. "I've been patient, Malik. I've respected your role as her father. But if you make choices that put her well-being at risk..." She paused, letting the threat settle. "There are other options, legal options." The room seemed to tilt sideways. "Are you threatening to take my daughter?" "I'm suggesting that if you can't provide an appropriate environment, someone else should." Marla adjusted her blazer. "All business now. Think carefully about your next steps. Ava deserves better than to be raised in a soup kitchen or left alone while you chase restaurant dreams." From down the hall came the sound of Ava humming to herself as she worked on her math problems. oblivious to the conversation that could shatter her world. I should go. Marla moved toward the door. Just consider what I've said. Good night. The door clicked shut behind her with terrible finality. Malik stood frozen in the living room, his heart pounding. Eventually, Ava's voice broke through his shock. Daddy, I finished the fractions. Coming, baby. He called back, forcing brightness into his tone. Later, after stories and prayers and tucking Ava into bed, Malik sat alone in the dark living room. The only light came from a street lamp outside, casting long shadows across the floor. His hands trembled slightly as he opened his wallet and pulled out a folded piece of paper, a note written in his wife's flowing script, dated just days before the accident that took her. The paper was worn soft at the creases, the ink fading in spots where his fingers had traced the words countless times. Take care of our girl, love. Show her that kindness and dreams can live in the same heart. Malik pressed the note between his palms like a prayer, breathing in the quiet of his sleeping daughter's home, recommitting himself to the promise he'd made, to be both safety and possibility for their child, no matter what it cost him. Morning light streamed through St. Bridget's kitchen windows as Malik tied his apron. The familiar scent of coffee and toast filled the air. He'd made his choice, at least for now. The shelter kitchen needed him, and more importantly, Ava needed stability. Daddy, can I help sort the carrots? Ava sat at the prep table, swinging her legs. She wore her own mini apron, decorated with crayon drawings of fruits and vegetables. Sure can, sunshine. Just remember what I taught you about the good ones versus the too soft ones. Malik watched as his daughter carefully examined each carrot, creating two neat piles, her face scrunched in concentration, just like her mother's used to do. The thought brought a gentle smile to his face. Mr. Gus, Ava suddenly chirped, abandoning her carrots to run toward the kitchen entrance. The old veteran ambled in, his cane tapping against the linoleum floor. Well, if it isn't my favorite kitchen helper. He ruffled Ava's hair. What's cooking today, chef? That's when an idea struck Malik. Actually, Gus, I'd love to hear about what you used to cook, back in the day. Gus's eyes lit up. You mean during my service? Boy, let me tell you about what we'd whip up with those old field rations. For the next hour, as Malik prepped the day's lunch, Gus shared stories about creating meals in impossible conditions. Ava sat captivated, asking questions about every detail. She pulled out her little notebook, the one she carried everywhere, and started sketching what she imagined the dishes looked like. Sometimes, Gus explained, we'd trade with the local villagers, get some fresh herbs, maybe some rice. Made this one stew that kept us going through the worst nights. Simple stuff, but it tasted like home. That evening, after the lunch rush, Malik sat with Ava at a quiet table. What do you think about visiting more of our friends here, learning about their special recipes? Ava's eyes widened. Like food detectives? Exactly like food detectives. We could call them taste tours. The next day, they started with Sister Alma, who shared memories of Sunday suppers after church. The day after, they visited Miss Plank's Rose, who described the dumplings her grandmother made during the Depression. Each story filled Ava's notebook with drawings and Malik's mind with inspiration. They developed a routine. After school, Ava would do her homework in the kitchen while Malik prepped. Then they'd spend an hour with one of the shelter residents, listening to their food memories. Malik would take mental notes, combining their stories with his culinary knowledge to create something new yet familiar. The kitchen became more than just a place to feed hungry people. It transformed into a living museum of food memories. Ava posted her drawings on the wall, labeling each one with the person's name and their special dish. When it came time to honor Gus's story, Malik spent days getting it right. He combined elements of traditional army rations with the techniques Gus had described from his time overseas. The result was a hearty stew that spoke of both hardship and hope. One quiet afternoon, Malik called Gus into the kitchen. Ava bounced excitedly beside the stove, watching as her father ladled the steaming stew into a bowl. "We're calling it Gus's Field Kit Stew," Ava announced proudly, pointing to her drawing on the wall, a colorful interpretation of soldiers sharing a meal. Gus's weathered hands trembled slightly as he accepted the bowl. The kitchen fell silent as he took his first spoonful. His eyes closed, and for a moment, Malik worried he'd gotten it wrong. Then Gus opened his eyes, a wide grin spreading across his face. "Well, I'll be damned. Pardon my French, little miss," he winked at Ava. "This is better than my mama's." Malik felt warmth spread through his chest, brighter than any Michelin star could offer. Right here, in this humble shelter kitchen, with his daughter by his side and Gus's approval shining in his eyes, he knew he was exactly where he needed to be. "Can we cook Miss Rose's dumplings next?" Ava asked, already flipping to a fresh page in her notebook. "Sure can, sunshine," Malik replied, watching Gus savor another spoonful. "We've got plenty more stories to tell through food." The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across St. Bridget's dining hall. Malik stood in the kitchen, arranging fresh herbs on small plates while his hands trembled slightly. Through the service window, he could see Isabel seated with 3 well-dressed investors at one of the worn wooden tables, now covered with crisp white cloths borrowed from Sister Alma's church. Ava sat nearby, coloring menu cards with careful strokes of her colored pencils. Her tongue poked out in concentration as she drew tiny stars around each dish name. "Daddy," she whispered, "is it time for Gus's stew yet?" Malik smiled, reaching down to smooth her braids. "Almost, baby. Remember what we practiced?" She nodded solemnly. "First comes Miss Rose's cornbread because she's the oldest." The kitchen door swung open as Sister Alma entered, her gray hair neat under her usual bandana. "They're ready when you are, Malik. And don't you worry, our folks know exactly what to say." She gave his arm a gentle squeeze. Malik took a deep breath and began plating the first course. The cornbread came out in perfect golden squares, topped with honey butter and fresh lavender. Miss Rose, a tiny woman in her 80s, walked slowly to the investors' table with Sister Alma's help. "This here, cornbread," Miss Rose said, her voice wavering but clear, "is just like my mama used to make during the war. We didn't have much, but that bread meant love." She nodded to Malik. "This young man, he listened to my story and brought it back to life." The investors sampled the cornbread, making appreciative sounds. Isabel caught Malik's eye through the window and smiled. Next came Mr. Chen's dumplings, carefully folded and steamed to perfection. The elderly veteran stood straight-backed as he explained how his grandmother had taught him to make them while hiding from soldiers during wartime. "But these," he said, tasting one himself, "these have peace in them." Malik worked steadily, his movements precise and focused. Each plate told a story of survival, of comfort, found in the smallest acts of kindness. The investors leaned forward, hanging on every word as shelter residents shared their memories. When Gus's Field Kit Stew arrived, steam rising from bowls of tender meat and vegetables, the old veteran's voice filled the hall. "In Vietnam, we'd trade whatever we had for spices. A taste of home kept us going." He gestured to Malik. "This man here, he took my scattered memories and made them real again." Sister Alma's choir cornbread came forth, accompanied by her story of feeding young protesters during the civil rights movement. "Food gives courage," she said simply, "and this kitchen, it gives dignity." For the final course, Ava proudly carried a small plate of sweet potato pie squares to the table. "This is my grandma's recipe," she announced clearly, just as they'd practiced. "The one my mama used to make. Daddy says good food keeps love alive." Malik watched through the window as one of the investors, a sharp-featured woman in a gray suit, dabbed at her eyes with a napkin. Another investor, a man with silver hair, was writing rapidly in a small notebook. Isabel stood, her chef's whites crisp even after hours of sitting. "This," she declared, "is what real hospitality looks like." Not just feeding bodies, but honoring stories. She turned to her companions. The community kitchen program we discussed? This is where it starts. The silver-haired man closed his notebook. The rooftop garden proposal? Double it, and add a training program budget. He looked around the humble hall. People need to know about this place. The woman in gray nodded firmly. I want quarterly reports on community impact, and that stove needs replacing yesterday. Consider it done. Sister Alma's hand found Malik's shoulder as he stood in the kitchen doorway. The weight of the moment pressed against his chest, not crushing now, but expanding. Like bread rising in a warm oven, like hope taking shape. The residents who had shared their stories gathered near the kitchen, pride shining on their faces. Ava slipped her small hand into Malik's, looking up at him with bright eyes. Around them, the familiar walls of St. Bridget's seemed to hold their breath, waiting to see what tomorrow might bring. The middle. The last plates had been cleared, and the evening light was fading through St. Bridget's tall windows. Malik wiped his hands on his apron, finally allowing himself to breathe normally again. The investors had left smiling, their notepads filled with numbers and promises. Only a few people remained in the dining hall, Sister Alma collecting tablecloths, Ava gathering her colored pencils, and a quiet man in the corner finishing his coffee. Tasha Blue, who had been documenting the evening for her food blog, was scrolling through photos on her camera when she suddenly grabbed Malik's arm. "Oh my God," she whispered, her eyes wide. "That man in the corner. Don't look too obvious, but I think I know who he is." Malik glanced casually toward the corner table. The man was middle-aged, wearing a simple gray suit, nothing flashy. He was writing something on a small card. "What do you mean?" Malik asked, keeping his voice low. Tasha's fingers tightened on his arm. "I've seen him before at other restaurants. The way he takes notes, how he tries every component separately first. Malik, I'm pretty sure he's a Michelin inspector." Before Malik could process this information, the man stood up and walked toward the kitchen window. He smiled, a small, precise expression, and placed a business card on the counter. Without a word, he nodded and left through the side door. Malik picked up the card with slightly shaky hands. The paper was thick, expensive. In simple black text it read, "Keep cooking where you are seen." "Let me see." Tasha was practically bouncing. When Malik showed her the card, she squealed quietly. "I knew it. This is huge, Malik. Like, life-changing huge." Sister Alma appeared beside them, curious about the excitement. "What's all this fuss about?" As Tasha explained, Malik leaned against the counter, feeling slightly dizzy. He watched Ava, who was showing her menu drawings to one of the regular shelter guests. His daughter's face glowed with pride and joy, completely unaware of the weight of what had just happened. "Daddy," Ava called out, running over with her drawings. "Can we put these up in the kitchen? Mr. Chen said mine looks just like real restaurant art." Malik scooped her up, drawings and all. "Of course we can, baby. Your art makes this place special." Over her head, he caught Sister Alma's knowing smile. The kitchen door swung open, and Isabel strode in, her chef's coat still pristine despite the long evening. Her eyes were bright with excitement. "Malik, do you have a moment? We need to talk." Sister Alma immediately reached for Ava. "Come on, sweetheart. Let's go hang up your beautiful artwork while your daddy has a grown-up conversation." In Isabel's familiar, direct manner, she pulled out a chair at the prep table and gestured for Malik to sit. From her leather portfolio, she withdrew a thick envelope. "What you did tonight," she began, "was extraordinary. Not just the food, though that was magnificent, but the way you connected each dish to its story, to its person." She paused, studying his face. "You understand what hospitality truly means. It's not about fancy plates or expensive ingredients. It's about making people feel seen, feel valued." Malik nodded, thinking of Miss Rose's tears when she tasted the cornbread, of Mr. Chen's proud smile as he shared his grandmother's story. "I've made a decision," Isabel continued. I don't want you just as a chef in my kitchen. I want you as a partner. She opened the envelope and spread out several documents. This is a formal offer for a chef partner position at Maison Common, but I've structured it differently than we initially discussed. Malik leaned forward, his heart racing but his face calm. You'll work primarily during the day, research and development, menu planning, staff training. We'll build a teaching kitchen where you can continue working with the community. She tapped the papers with one perfectly manicured finger. And most importantly, we're including a dedicated children's space, a proper daycare facility, staffed and licensed. Ava will always have a safe place to be while you work. Malik's throat tightened. He thought of Marla's threats, of the constant juggling act between his dreams and his daughter's needs. You'd do that? Isabel's expression softened. Malik, what you've created here, in this humble shelter kitchen, it's what every restaurant should aspire to be. You've made a family out of strangers. You've turned simple meals into moments of dignity and joy. She pushed the papers toward him. I want to give you the resources to do it on a bigger scale, without having to choose between your calling and your child. Through the kitchen window, Malik could see Ava helping Sister Alma pin her drawings to the bulletin board. His daughter stood on tiptoes, pointing out details to the shelter guests who had gathered to admire her work. The sight made his chest ache with love and possibility. The salary is generous, Isabel continued, and you'll have full creative control over the community outreach programs. We'll start with apprenticeships for shelter residents who want to learn culinary skills. She smiled. Think of it as building a bridge between two worlds that should have never been separated in the first place. Malik picked up the business card the inspector had left, running his thumb over the embossed text. Keep cooking where you are seen, he read aloud. Exactly, Isabel said softly. You've already proven that excellence and empathy can coexist. Now let's show the world how it's done. The morning sun streamed through the shelter's kitchen windows as Malik checked his phone during a quick break. His social media notifications had exploded overnight. Strange comments and questions filled his inbox, most from food bloggers and local reporters he'd never heard of before. Where did you learn French cuisine? One asked. Sources say you worked in Paris. Is this true? Pressed another. Malik frowned, setting down his coffee. He'd never claimed any such thing. His cooking came from his grandmother's kitchen, from community potlucks, from the creative necessity of making something from nothing. Sure, he'd picked up French techniques during his brief time in culinary school, but that was years ago. The shelter's morning routine hummed around him. The clatter of pans, the whoosh of the industrial dishwasher, the murmur of early risers waiting for breakfast. Sister Alma bustled past with a stack of clean plates, pausing when she saw his troubled expression. Everything all right, dear? She asked. Before Malik could answer, his phone buzzed. It was Tasha. Have you seen what they're saying? Her usually cheerful voice was tight with concern. Just some weird questions, Malik replied, stepping into the pantry for privacy. What's going on? There's a rumor going around. Tasha took a deep breath. Someone's telling food writers that you've been stealing recipes from Chef Marchand. Malik's stomach dropped. What? It's all over Food Scene Weekly's website. They're saying you copied her signature dishes from when you staged in her kitchen, which I know isn't true because you've never worked there. The unfairness of it hit Malik like a physical blow. He thought of his gumbo, born from necessity and love. Of Gus's field kit stew, inspired by a veteran's stories of making comfort food in impossible conditions. Each dish carried memories, carried history, his history. This is crazy, he said, running a hand over his face. I've never claimed. I know, Tasha cut in. Look, I'm already working on damage control. I've got videos showing your original process, the community tastings, everything. But, she hesitated. But what? These kinds of rumors, they can stick, especially when someone's trying to break into the industry. Malik leaned against the pantry shelves, surrounded by the organized rows of canned goods he knew by heart. Each dented can represented a potential meal, a chance to create something meaningful. Now someone was trying to turn that meaning into theft. His phone buzzed again, more notifications. A local food critic asking for comment. A message from one of the investors who'd attended the tasting, expressing concerns about originality. Malik? Tasha's voice brought him back. We need to get ahead of this. Let me post those videos of you creating the homecoming menu. Show everyone where your inspiration really comes from. He nodded, then remembered she couldn't see him. Do it. But Tasha, who would start something like this? I might have an idea, she said slowly. I've been hearing whispers. Let me do some digging. After hanging up, Malik stood in the pantry for a moment longer, gathering himself. Through the door, he could hear Ava's voice. She must have arrived early before school to help with breakfast. Her laughter mixed with the sounds of Sister Alma teaching her how to fold napkins properly. He couldn't let this touch her. Couldn't let her see how much it hurt to have his integrity questioned, his life's work twisted into something ugly. Taking a deep breath, Malik stepped back into the kitchen. He had meals to prepare, people to feed. The truth would have to speak for itself. Throughout the day, the rumors grew. Local food blogs picked up the story, each version more elaborate than the last. By afternoon, Malik had supposedly apprenticed in 3 different French kitchens and stolen a secret sauce recipe from a Parisian vault. Tasha kept her word, flooding social media with videos of Malik cooking at St. Bridget's. The shelter's regulars rallied too, posting their own stories of his cooking, his kindness, his original creations. But the damage was spreading. At closing time, Malik's phone rang again. It was Isabel. Mon ami, she said, her voice warm but worried. We need to talk about these ridiculous accusations. Chef, I swear. Non, I know they are lies. Your cooking, it has soul, history. No one could steal that. She paused. But I need to know who would want to hurt you this way. Before Malik could respond, his phone pinged with a message from Tasha. It was a photo, taken less than an hour ago, at Le Petit Café downtown. In it, Dorian Pike sat in a corner booth, leaning close to a woman with a reporter's notebook, his face animated as he spoke. The pieces clicked into place. Dorian, who had questioned Malik's credentials from day one, who had smiled to his face while whispering about standards behind his back. I think, Malik said slowly to Isabel, I might know. Say nothing more, Isabel replied, her tone shifting from warm to steel. I will handle this myself. Malik ended the call and looked around his kitchen, his real kitchen, where every scratch on the counter and burn mark on the stove told a story of service and survival. He thought of Dorian in that cafe, spinning tales to destroy what Malik had built. The evening light slanted through the windows, casting long shadows across the floor. In a few hours, the dinner crowd would arrive, hungry for more than just food. They came for community, for dignity, for the simple grace of a meal prepared with love. That, Malik knew, was something no one could steal or destroy. He tied his apron strings and got to work. Outside Le Petit Café, Dorian continued his quiet conversation with the journalist, unaware that his own world was about to shift beneath his feet. The shelter's kitchen doors swung open with a bang, silencing the usual morning chatter. A woman in a crisp navy blazer strode in, clipboard in hand. Her heels clicked sharply against the worn linoleum as she made her way to the prep area where Malik stood dicing onions. Health Department, she announced, flashing her badge. Angela Martinez. Routine inspection. Malik's knife paused mid-chop. There was nothing routine about an inspector showing up during breakfast service. Still, he kept his voice steady and professional. Of course. I'm Malik Turner, head cook. Welcome to St. Bridget's. Sister Alma appeared beside him, smoothing her apron. We weren't expecting an inspection today. That's the point, Inspector Martinez replied, already pulling on latex gloves. Mind if I start with the refrigeration units? Please, Malik gestured, He watched as she opened the industrial fridge, checking temperatures and expiration dates. His heart thumped against his ribs, but he knew their food storage was solid. He'd always been meticulous about rotation and labeling. The inspector moved methodically through the kitchen, making notes. She checked the dishwasher's temperature gauge, examined the cleaning logs, and peered into every corner. Malik and Sister Alma followed, answering her questions about procedures and schedules. "Your sanitation protocols are impressive," she commented, marking something on her clipboard, "especially for a facility this size." "Thank you," Malik said. "We take food safety seriously here." Then came the moment he'd been dreading. Inspector Martinez approached the ancient stove, its surface scratched and worn from decades of use. She turned the knobs, frowning at the uneven flame pattern. "How long has it been since this was serviced?" 3 months, Malik answered truthfully. "But it's been struggling. We're working on funding for a replacement." She made another note, her expression unreadable. Moving to the prep station, she crouched to examine the floor. Her finger traced along a hairline crack in the tile, following it to where it spider-webbed beneath the sink. "This is concerning," she said, standing up. "Cracked tile can harbor bacteria. It needs to be replaced immediately." Sister Alma clasped her hands together. "We're aware of the issue. We've applied for a grant." "I understand budget constraints," Inspector Martinez cut in, "but health code violations don't care about funding challenges." Malik's chest tightened. He thought about the veterans who depended on their meals, about Gus and his morning coffee, about the families who came for dinner. What can we do to stay operational while we address these issues? The inspector spent the next 20 minutes documenting every deficiency. The temperamental stove, the cracked tile, a small patch of peeling paint near the ceiling. Through it all, Malik maintained his composure, even as anxiety churned in his stomach. Finally, Inspector Martinez clicked her pen closed. "Here's where we stand. The major violations are the cooking equipment and floor integrity. Your cleaning protocols and food handling are excellent, which works in your favor." She pulled out a form. "I'm issuing a temporary permit, good for 30 days. You'll need to submit a detailed plan for addressing these issues within the week. Another inspection will follow." "Thank you," Malik said, relief washing over him. "We'll have that plan to you right away. One more thing," she added, her tone softening slightly. "Off the record? Your reputation for feeding people with dignity hasn't gone unnoticed. Make sure these repairs happen so you can keep doing that work." After she left, Malik slumped against the prep table, dabbing sweat from his forehead with his sleeve. Sister Alma touched his shoulder gently. "God provides," she murmured. "We'll find a way." But Malik barely heard her. His mind was racing, calculating costs they couldn't afford, wondering about the timing of this surprise inspection. In all his years at St. Brigid's, they'd never had an unannounced visit. He wiped his brow again, the question nagging at him. Who had called in the complaint? The lunch rush at St. Brigid's was in full swing. Steam rose from the serving trays as Malik ladled out portions of his improvised vegetable soup. The ancient stove might be temperamental, but he'd managed to coax enough warmth from its remaining working burners to feed everyone. "This hits the spot, son," Gus said from the serving line, holding out his bowl. His weathered face crinkled into a smile. "You could make cardboard taste good if you had to." Malik chuckled, giving Gus an extra helping of carrots. "Let's hope it doesn't come to that." A sharp tap on his shoulder made him turn. A young man in pressed khakis and a polo shirt stood there, holding a manila envelope. His expression was professionally blank. "Are you Malik Turner?" "Yes, that's me." Malik wiped his hands on his apron. "You've been served." The man thrust the envelope forward and quickly stepped back, as if the papers might bite. Malik's stomach dropped as he took the envelope. The serving line went quiet. He could feel concerned eyes on him as he broke the seal and pulled out the stack of legal documents. His hands trembled slightly as he read the first page. The words jumped out at him. Petition for modification of custody agreement and Marla Jennings versus Malik Turner. Sister Alma appeared at his side, touching his elbow. Malik, do you need a minute? He shook his head, trying to maintain composure. I need to finish serving lunch first. His voice came out hoarse. I've got this, Sister Alma said firmly, taking the ladle from his hand. Go read those papers somewhere quiet. Malik found himself in the shelter's small office, sinking into a worn chair. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead as he forced himself to read every word. Marla's petition painted a damning picture. Late nights at the shelter, Ava sleeping on pews during community events, exposure to unsafe elements. She even cited the recent health inspection as evidence of negligent conditions. The words blurred as tears threatened. He blinked them back hard, remembering Ava's face this morning as she'd skipped off to school, her backpack bouncing. She'd drawn a picture of them cooking together in their kitchen, stick figures with big smiles. A soft knock interrupted his thoughts. Tasha, one of the regular volunteers, poked her head in. Sister Alma asked me to check on you. Can I get you anything? Malik straightened, tucking the papers away. No thanks. I just need to figure out how to tell my daughter her grandmother is trying to take her away from me. Tasha's face softened with sympathy. You're the best father I know, Malik. Anyone who spends 5 minutes watching you with Ava can see that. He nodded, gathering strength. I need to pick her up from school soon. Would you mind helping Sister Alma finish up lunch service? Of course. Go take care of your girl. The walk to Ava's school felt both too long and too short. Malik's mind raced, trying to find the right words. How do you tell an 8-year-old that her family might be torn apart? When the final bell rang, Ava burst out of the building with her usual enthusiasm, dark braids flying. Daddy! She launched herself into his arms. Hey, sunshine! He hugged her tight, breathing in the familiar scent of her strawberry shampoo. Can we get ice cream? She looked up at him hopefully. I got an A on my spelling test. You know what? That's exactly what we need today. He took her small hand in his. And maybe we can sit in the park while we eat it? 20 minutes later, they sat on their favorite bench, Ava swinging her legs as she worked on a cone of mint chocolate chip. Malik had barely touched his vanilla. Baby, we need to talk about something important, he began gently. Ava lowered her ice cream, picking up on his serious tone. Is it about Grandma Marla? Sometimes her perceptiveness caught him off guard. Yes, it is. How did you know? She was asking me lots of questions last time, about the shelter, and if I get scared there, and if I miss having a real house to play in. Ava's voice got smaller. She didn't like my answers. Malik's heart ached. What did you tell her? That I love helping you cook for people. That Mr. Gus teaches me chess, and Sister Alma lets me help ring the dinner bell. Her lower lip trembled. Was that wrong? No, baby, not wrong at all. He pulled her close, ice cream and all. But Grandma Marla, she thinks you might be better off living with her. Ava stiffened against him. I don't want to live with Grandma. I want to stay with you. Hey, look at me. He waited until her tear-filled eyes met his. I promise you, with everything I am, that I will never let anyone take you away from me. We're a team, remember? She nodded, wiping her eyes with her free hand. Turner team. That's right. Turner team forever. He kissed the top of her head. Things might get a little complicated for a while, but I need you to know that none of this is your fault. And no matter what happens, I will always be your daddy, and I will always love you more than anything in this whole world. More than cooking? A hint of her usual playfulness crept back into her voice. Way more than cooking. He smiled, tapping her nose. More than all the recipes and all the cookbooks ever written. Ava snuggled closer, her ice cream forgotten and melting. I love you more than mint chocolate chip. Now that's serious love, Malik said, making her giggle despite everything. They sat together as the afternoon sun painted the park in warm colors, father and daughter holding each other up, just like always. The morning light filtered through the tall windows of Isabel's test kitchen, casting long shadows across the polished stainless steel counters. Malik stood at the entrance, watching as Isabel and her lawyer spread papers across the marble island. The contract was thick, at least 30 pages of legal language that would change his life forever. "Come in, come in." Isabel waved him over, her face bright with excitement. "Everything is ready. We just need your signature, and then we can start planning the opening menu." Malik stepped forward slowly, his work boots squeaking against the pristine floor. In his hand, he clutched a worn manila envelope containing Marla's custody petition. The weight of it seemed to pull at his entire body. "Before we start," he said quietly, "I need to show you something." Isabel's smile faded as she read through the court documents. Her fingers traced the lines of text, and her brow furrowed deeper with each page. "This is ridiculous," she muttered. "We can fight this. I'll testify myself about the schedule we've arranged." "It's not just that." Malik pulled out his phone and showed her the latest text from Sister Alma. The shelter's temporary permit was now under review. Without immediate repairs to the kitchen, they might have to stop serving meals entirely. "The timing of all this," Isabel's voice trailed off, "it feels orchestrated." "I know." Malik's hands were steady as he pushed the contract away. "And that's why I can't sign. Not right now." The lawyer gathered his papers without a word and stepped into the hallway, leaving them alone. Isabel leaned against the counter, her chef's coat suddenly seeming too stark in the morning light. "The shelter needs me," Malik continued. "Those people, they're not just guests to me. They're family. And right now, that family is at risk." "We could help them," Isabel insisted, "with the restaurant's resources. But that would take time we don't have. And every day I spend here fighting these battles is a day I'm not there making sure everyone gets fed." He touched the custody papers. "And every minute I spend defending myself in court is a minute I'm not being the father Ava needs." Isabel walked to the window, her reflection fragmenting in the glass. "I understand, family," she said softly. "More than you know. My own daughter. Well, that's another story. But I understand putting them first." Malik joined her at the window. Below, the city was waking up, delivery trucks unloading produce, cafes setting out chairs, people hurrying to work with coffee cups in hand. The inspector who came to the shelter? The timing wasn't random. The rumors about stolen recipes? Someone's trying to make sure I don't succeed here. "Dorian," Isabel said, her voice flat. "I should have seen it sooner." "Maybe, but that's not why I'm saying no." Malik turned to face her. "I'm saying no because sometimes the right path isn't the one that looks best on paper. Sometimes it's the harder road." "The shelter kitchen barely works," Isabel reminded him. "The pay is nothing. The hours are impossible. But every person who comes through those doors knows they'll be fed. They know someone cares enough to cook for them with respect." He smiled slightly. "And my daughter knows that too. She sees it every day." Isabel was quiet for a long moment. Then she walked to her office and returned with a business card. "When you're ready, when things are more stable, call me. The offer stays open." "Thank you." Malik tucked the card into his pocket. "For everything. For seeing something in me that day at the shelter." "I saw more than something," Isabel said. "I saw excellence with empathy. That's rare in this business." She straightened her chef's coat. "Now go. Your family needs you." "Both of them," Malik agreed. "The one at home and the one at St. Bridget's." He turned to leave, but Isabel called after him. "Malik, whatever happens with the shelter kitchen, don't let them shut you down. Some lights need to keep burning." Malik nodded, then walked out of the test kitchen and into the morning sun. The contract remained unsigned on the counter, but his heart felt lighter than it had in days. Sometimes saying no to a dream meant saying yes to something even more important. The evening shadows stretched long across St. Bridget's dining hall as Malik tied his apron with practiced motions. His mind was still heavy from declining Isabel's offer earlier that day, but the familiar rhythm of dinner prep beckoned. He pulled out vegetables from the cooler, setting them on the worn cutting board with careful precision. "Looking good there, chef," Gus called from his usual spot near the kitchen door. The elderly veteran had taken to arriving early, claiming he liked to watch Malik work his magic. Malik managed a small smile. "Just getting started, Gus. Nothing magic about chopping onions." He turned to the ancient stove, twisting the knob to preheat the oven. Nothing happened. He tried again, then a third time, his movements becoming more urgent. The burners remained cold and lifeless. "Come on, old girl," he whispered, patting the stove's scratched surface. "Not tonight." Sister Alma appeared in the doorway, her face etched with concern. "Everything all right, Malik?" "The stove." He swallowed hard. "I think she's finally given up." Sister Alma crossed herself. "Lord have mercy. How many people are we expecting tonight?" 73. Malik knew the exact number. He always did. Each number represented a person, a story, a need he took personally. He quickly assessed their options. The portable burner from last week wouldn't be enough for dinner service. The microwave could only handle so much. His chest tightened as he thought of the hungry faces that would soon fill the hall. Tasha, who had stopped by to help, was already pulling out her phone. "I can post on social media, see if any restaurants." "No time," Malik said quietly. He opened the refrigerator, counting loaves of bread and containers of sandwich filling. "We'll have to go with Plan B." For the next hour, Malik directed a small army of volunteers in assembly line fashion. Tasha spread mayo and mustard. Sister Alma added lettuce and tomatoes. Gus, insisting on helping despite his arthritis, wrapped each sandwich carefully in wax paper. As the dining hall filled, Malik's heart grew heavier. These people deserved hot meals, not cold sandwiches. He thought of Mr. Johnson, who had trouble chewing, and Mrs. People, Washington, who needed extra calories to take with her diabetes medication. "I'm sorry," he said to each person as he handed them their plates. "The stove's not working tonight." But something remarkable happened. Instead of complaints, he received understanding smiles. Mrs. Washington patted his hand. "You do what you can with what you've got, sugar." "Just like always." Mr. Johnson nodded. "Remember when my Eleanor stove died? 8 sandwiches for a week straight." The conversations around the tables remained warm, filled with the usual mix of stories and laughter. Still, Malik noticed how quickly people finished their meals, missing the comfort of hot food on a cool evening. After the last guest left, Malik stood alone in the darkened kitchen. The broken stove loomed like a mountain of defeat. He thought of Isabel's gleaming kitchen, of the contract he'd turned down, of all the possibilities that now felt further away than ever. He placed his hands on the cold stovetop and bowed his head. "Lord," he whispered, "I know there's a way. I just can't see it yet. Show me how to keep my promises to these people, to Ava, to myself." The kitchen remained silent except for the hum of the refrigerator and the distant sound of Sister Alma locking up for the night. Malik's prayer hung in the air, a quiet plea for guidance in the growing darkness. His phone buzzed, a text from Ava saying she'd finished her homework at the neighbor's house. Even in this moment of uncertainty, his daughter's message reminded him of what mattered most. He'd chosen family over ambition today, but standing in this kitchen, he wondered if there wasn't a way to honor both callings. He began cleaning up, wiping down counters, and storing leftover supplies, his movements automatic after years of routine. The broken stove watched him work, a reminder of all that needed fixing, all that felt just out of reach. When the last dish was dried and put away, Malik stood in the center of his kitchen, because it was his kitchen, broken stove and all. These walls had witnessed countless meals created from nearly nothing, countless moments of communion disguised as simple sustenance. He touched the cross that hung by the door, the same one his wife had given him years ago. The metal was cool against his fingers as he prayed one last time, not for answers but for strength to face whatever came next. Sister Alma's keys jangled in the hallway, her signal that it was time to leave. But Malik remained for just a moment more, his prayer unfinished, his heart still searching for the path forward in the quiet darkness of his kitchen. The evening shadows stretched across St. Bridget's dining hall as Malik stared at the dead stove, his hands resting on the cold metal surface. The kitchen felt empty without its usual warmth and familiar sounds. "You know what this reminds me of?" Gus's voice broke through the silence. He stood in the doorway, leaning on his cane. "Back in Nam, we'd cook with whatever we could find, made some mighty fine meals under the stars." Malik turned, raising an eyebrow. "Under the stars?" "Sure thing." Gus shuffled closer, his eyes lighting up. "Get some propane burners, maybe those fancy portable grills folks use for tailgating. Set up right out there in the parking lot." Sister Alma appeared behind Gus, her practical shoes squeaking on the linoleum. "You might be onto something there, Gus." She pulled out her phone, already scrolling through contacts. "My nephew's on the city council. We could get temporary permits for outdoor food service." "Like a block party?" Tasha walked in, camera in hand. She'd been documenting meals at the shelter for her blog. "We could make it an event, get the community involved." Malik felt a spark of hope kindle in his chest. "You really think people would come?" "Are you kidding?" Tasha's fingers flew across her phone screen. "I'm posting about it right now." St. Bridget's table, cooking with heart under the open sky. She showed him the draft. "Your story's gonna touch people, Malik." The chef, who wouldn't leave his community behind. Within hours, Tasha's post started gaining traction. Local farmers called offering produce that wouldn't sell at market. A veterans group showed up with industrial extension cords and temporary lighting. 2 food trucks offered their portable kitchen equipment on their off days. Sister Alma worked her magic with city officials, securing permits in record time. "Sometimes," she said with a wink, "being a persistent old nun has its advantages." The next afternoon, the shelter's parking lot transformed. Veterans strung lights between poles, creating a warm glow against the darkening sky. Borrowed tables lined up in neat rows, topped with simple white cloths donated by a local hotel. The air filled with the sound of extension cords being unrolled and propane burners clicking to life. Malik stood at his makeshift cooking station, surrounded by fresh vegetables, donated spices, and enough pots to feed an army. Ava sat nearby, carefully writing out menu cards with colorful markers. "Looking good, chef," Gus said, inspecting the setup. "Just like old times, except better company." He patted Malik's shoulder. "You got this, son." People started arriving before the sun set. First came the shelter's regular guests, then curious neighbors drawn by the lights and smells. Soon, a line stretched around the block. Tasha moved through the crowd, capturing moments with her camera, elderly couples sharing plates, children dancing between tables, strangers becoming friends over bowls of food. The portable burners roared as Malik worked his magic. Steam rose into the cool evening air as he stirred massive pots of gumbo, the recipe adapted from that first day when the stove died. But this time, instead of dented cans, he had fresh shrimp donated by a local fishmonger, vegetables straight from nearby farms, and herbs picked that morning from container gardens. Sister Alma organized volunteers into an efficient serving line. "Just like feeding the 5,000, she quipped, directing traffic with the authority of a traffic cop. "Though I suspect we'll need more than 5 loaves and 2 fish tonight." As the evening progressed, the crowd grew larger. People brought folding chairs and blankets, spreading out on any available space. The string lights twinkled overhead like stars, casting a warm glow over the impromptu dining room. Gus stationed himself near Malik's cooking station, telling stories about outdoor cooking during his service years. His voice carried over the crowd, making people laugh and lean in to hear more. "Never thought I'd say this," he announced, "but this gumbo's better than any sea ration feast I ever cooked up." Tasha's livestream captured the moment when Malik served his 100th bowl. The crowd had started a spontaneous cheer, calling his name. He looked up from his pot, ladle in hand, surprised by the sound. Ava beamed beside him, holding up her hand-drawn sign. "My dad feeds everyone." The steam rose from the bowls as Malik continued serving, each portion a promise kept to his community. Under the borrowed lights, surrounded by the warmth of hundreds of neighbors, the night air filled with something more than just the aroma of good food. It carried the scent of hope. The morning sun streamed through the windows of Isabel's test kitchen, casting long shadows across the pristine stainless steel counters. She stood at her workstation, methodically reviewing a stack of newspaper clippings and printouts from food blogs. Her jaw tightened as she read each headline about Malik's alleged recipe theft. Dorian breezed in through the swinging doors, his chef's coat perfectly pressed. "Good morning, chef. I've adjusted the sauce recipes for tonight's tasting." He moved to his station, apparently oblivious to the storm brewing in Isabel's expression. "Interesting timing," Isabel said, her French accent thickening with anger. She spread the articles across the counter. "These stories began appearing right after you expressed your concerns about Malik." Dorian barely glanced at the papers. "Oh, I hadn't noticed." "Really?" Isabel picked up her phone and played a recording. Dorian's voice filled the kitchen, speaking to a food blogger about questionable practices and stolen recipes. The color drained from Dorian's face. "I was merely expressing professional concerns." "Professional concerns?" Isabel's voice cut like a knife. "Like the anonymous health inspection complaint at St. Bridget's?" Dorian's shoulders stiffened. "I don't know what you mean." "The inspector is an old friend." Isabel stepped closer, her eyes blazing. "He showed me the complaint. The email came from your personal account. That shelter kitchen is a liability. The only liability in my kitchen is you." Isabel's words echoed off the walls. "Your prejudice, your jealousy, your small-minded attempt to destroy a good man's reputation." The kitchen staff had begun filtering in, stopping in their tracks at the scene unfolding before them. "I was protecting our standards," Dorian protested, his voice rising. "He's a shelter cook with a criminal record." "He's twice the chef you'll ever be," Isabel shot back. "He creates beauty from scraps. He feeds people with dignity. While you?" She gestured at the articles. "You feed your own ego with lies." Dorian's face flushed red. "You can't possibly." "I can, and I will." Isabel straightened to her full height. "You're fired, Dorian. Pack your knives and get out of my kitchen." "You're making a mistake," he sputtered, looking around at the gathered staff. "This will ruin everything we've built." "No," Isabel said firmly. "What we're building starts with integrity, something you clearly lack." She turned to her assistant. "Call the PR team. Set up a press conference for this afternoon." 3 hours later, Isabel stood before a crowd of reporters in the construction site that would soon become her new restaurant. Sawdust caught the afternoon light like golden specks, and the smell of fresh paint hung in the air. "I've called you here today to address the rumors surrounding Malik Turner," she began, her voice clear and strong. "These allegations are false. They stem from the prejudice and unprofessional actions of a former employee who has been terminated." Camera shutters clicked rapidly as she continued. "Malik Turner represents everything I believe in as a chef. His creativity, his dedication to feeding his community with dignity, his ability to create extraordinary food under the most challenging circumstances, these are the qualities that make a true chef." She paused, looking directly into the cameras. "Malik is not just a hire for our restaurant. He is its beating heart. His commitment to excellence and empathy will shape everything we do here. And I am honored to stand beside him as a partner in this venture, whenever he is ready to accept that role." The reporters erupted with questions, but Isabel raised her hand for silence. "That's all for now, though I suggest you visit St. Bridget's parking lot this evening. I hear they're serving the best gumbo in the city." She smiled, a fierce pride glowing in her eyes. Under the stars. The end. The autumn breeze carried the scent of simmering stew across St. Bridget's parking lot. Under strings of twinkling lights, volunteers weaved between folding tables draped with clean white cloths. Among them moved a slight man in a plain gray sweater, his silver-rimmed glasses catching the light as he carried plates to waiting guests. Malik noticed him from his station at the portable burners. There was something familiar about the careful way the man placed each dish, how he paused to truly see each person he served. It took a moment before recognition clicked, the same quiet observer who had left that cryptic card weeks ago. "Table 6 needs 2 more bowls of Gus's stew," Tasha called out, her camera swinging from her neck as she coordinated service. "Coming right up," Malik responded, ladling generous portions into ceramic bowls, donated by the local church for these pop-up dinners. He watched as the inspector-turned-volunteer delivered them with genuine warmth. Throughout the evening, the man pitched in wherever needed, refilling water glasses, clearing plates, even helping Sister Alma arrange fresh flowers in tin can vases. He worked with the precise attention to detail that had likely served him well in his official capacity. Near closing time, he approached Malik's station. "Your food has even more heart when served under the stars," he said softly, extending his hand. "James Morton." Malik wiped his palm on his apron before shaking it. "Thank you for helping tonight. We're grateful for every pair of hands." "The gratitude is mine," James replied, glancing around at the bustling lot. "I've eaten in restaurants around the world, but there's something here that many of them miss entirely." "Oh?" Malik stirred the remaining stew, adding a pinch more thyme. "True hospitality," James said. "The kind that feeds more than just the body." He helped Malik pack up the remaining supplies, working in comfortable silence for a few minutes, before adding, "Would you mind if I wrote about this?" Malik looked up, surprised. "About the shelter dinners?" "About what real excellence in food service looks like," James explained. "About how a chef with no fancy kitchen or expensive ingredients can create something more meaningful than many starred establishments manage." "I'm just trying to feed my community," Malik said softly. "Exactly." James smiled. "That's precisely what I want to write about." 2 days later, Malik found the morning paper rolled up on his doorstep. Ava was already awake, drawing at the kitchen table while munching on toast. "Look what came for us, baby girl," he said, unfolding the paper to reveal James's op-ed in the editorial section. "Read it out loud, Daddy." Ava scooted her chair closer, leaving her drawings forgotten. Malik cleared his throat and began. "The Ethics of Excellence. A Lesson from a Parking Lot Kitchen." By James Morton. For 15 years, I've evaluated restaurants across 3 continents, measuring excellence through a carefully calibrated lens of technique, creativity, and consistency. But last week, I found myself serving plates in a church parking lot, and I learned something profound about what makes food truly exceptional. The chef was Malik Turner, cooking on borrowed burners under open skies. His kitchen was a folding table, his dining room a collection of mismatched chairs, his guests a beautiful tapestry of our city's faces, some who could pay, many who couldn't. What I witnessed wasn't just cooking, it was communion. Every dish came with a story, every serving with dignity. I watched as Turner plated Gus's field kit stew with the same care a 3-star chef might lavish on Wagyu beef. The difference? Turner knew Gus, knew the Vietnam memory that inspired the recipe, knew that feeding people is about more than filling stomachs. In our industry's pursuit of prestige, we sometimes forget that hospitality begins with a simple question: who do you serve when no one is looking, when there are no critics to impress, no stars to earn? Turner serves everyone. He serves with skill honed in culinary school and wisdom learned from life. He serves with limited resources, but unlimited heart. Most importantly, he serves with the understanding that true excellence isn't just about what's on the plate, it's about who's around the table. As our industry debates the future of fine dining, perhaps we should look to this parking lot kitchen for guidance. Here, excellence and empathy aren't competing values, they're essential partners. Malik's voice caught as he continued reading. The article went on to praise the community's response to the shelter's needs, the dignity of the service, the quality of food created from humble ingredients. It ended with a call for the restaurant industry to re-examine its priorities and definition of success. "Daddy," Ava's small hand covered his where it rested on the paper. "Are you crying?" "Happy tears, sweet pea," he assured her, pulling her into his lap. "Sometimes words can be a real gift." Ava wrapped her arms around his neck, squeezing tight. "I like his words about you," she whispered. "They're true." Malik held his daughter close, the morning sun warming them both through the kitchen window. The newspaper lay open before them, its words somehow making their current struggles feel a little lighter, a little more hopeful. The courthouse hallway buzzed with quiet tension. Malik straightened his tie for the 100th time, his fingers trembling slightly. Sister Alma noticed and reached over to adjust it herself, her weathered hands steady and sure. "Child, stop fussing," she said softly. "You look fine." Ava sat between them on the wooden bench, her patent leather shoes clicking together as she swung her feet. She wore her favorite dark blue dress, the one her mother had bought her, with a white ribbon in her hair. Unlike the adults around her, she seemed almost peaceful. "All rise," the bailiff called as they filed into the courtroom. Marla sat on the opposite side with her attorney, her face set in worried lines. Malik caught her eye for a moment, seeing not anger there, but fear, the same fear he felt about doing right by Ava. Judge Martinez settled into her chair, reviewing the papers before her. "This is a custody modification hearing regarding Ava Turner," she stated, looking over her reading glasses at the assembled group. "I understand we have several character witnesses today?" Malik's attorney stood. "Yes, Your Honor. We'd like to begin with Sister Alma Ruiz." Sister Alma made her way to the witness stand, her sensible shoes quiet on the carpeted floor. After being sworn in, she sat straight-backed, her hands folded in her lap. "Sister Alma, how long have you known Mr. Turner and his daughter?" the attorney asked. "Going on 3 years now," she replied, her voice clear and strong. "Since Malik first came to volunteer at St. Brigid's." "And what have you observed about their relationship?" Sister Alma's face softened. "I've worked with families for over 40 years, Your Honor. I know what love looks like in action, not just words. Malik, he doesn't just feed bodies, he feeds souls. And everything he does with Ava in mind." She described how Malik had transformed the shelter's kitchen into a classroom for his daughter. "Ava does her homework at a little table while he cooks. He teaches her fractions through measuring cups and geography through spices. When other children might be parked in front of a TV, she's learning about nutrition, about service, about community." Next came Gus, who despite his pressed shirt and polished shoes, couldn't quite hide his military bearing. He spoke of watching Malik and Ava together during countless meals. "That little girl isn't just loved, she's respected," Gus testified, his gruff voice softening. "Malik listens to her ideas like they matter, because to him, they do." She suggested we start growing herbs in window boxes, and now we've got a whole teaching garden. She's learning responsibility, compassion, and grit, things you can't get from any book. Chef Isabelle Marchand took the stand next, her professional demeanor apparent even in the formal setting. She spoke of Malik's exceptional talent, but focused more on his character. "I offered him a prestigious position, one that could have changed his life financially," Isabel explained. "But he chose to delay that opportunity because he wanted to ensure it wouldn't disrupt Ava's routine. Every decision he makes begins with, 'How will this affect my daughter?'" The last witness surprised everyone. The quiet man in the gray suit introduced himself as James Whitmore, a restaurant industry professional. His testimony carried particular weight as he described witnessing Malik and Ava's interactions during both formal tastings and informal community meals. "In my profession, we evaluate excellence," he said carefully. "What I've observed between Malik and Ava Turner is excellence in parenting. She is confident, well-adjusted, and deeply secure in her father's love. Moreover, she's learning invaluable life lessons about service and community that will shape her character for years to come." Throughout the testimony, Malik kept his eyes forward, occasionally glancing at Ava, who had been listening with unusual stillness. When the judge asked if there was anything else to add, Ava raised her hand. "Your Honor," Malik's attorney said, "Ava has asked if she might speak." Judge Martinez smiled gently. "Of course. Ava, would you like to come up here and talk to me?" Ava stood, smoothing her dress just like Sister Alma had taught her. She walked to the front with small, measured steps. After being helped into the witness chair, she looked directly at the judge. "My daddy feeds people," she said simply, her clear voice carrying through the quiet courtroom. "He always saves the last roll for me." The judge's face softened as she leaned forward slightly. "He saves it just for you?" Ava nodded. "Even when we have lots of hungry people at the shelter, he says I'm his number one, always and forever." She twisted the ribbon of her dress. "But he taught me it's good to share the other roles, because everybody needs food and love, that's what he says." A small smile played at the corners of Judge Martinez's mouth as she regarded the little girl before her. The courtroom fell silent as Judge Martinez adjusted her reading glasses, studying the thick folder of testimonies before her. Malik's heart thundered in his chest as he sat perfectly still, his hands clasped tightly in his lap. "I've heard compelling testimony today," Judge Martinez began, her voice carrying clear authority but also warmth. "From a decorated veteran, a respected member of the clergy, an acclaimed chef, and even a distinguished food critic, all speaking to Mr. Turner's character and dedication as a father." She paused, looking directly at Malik. But perhaps the most telling evidence came from the smallest witness in this courtroom. Ava, sitting between Malik and her court-appointed advocate, straightened in her chair. The judge's expression softened as she continued. "Young lady, your words about your father, simple, honest, and true, spoke volumes. My daddy feeds people. He always saves the last roll for me." In those two sentences, you captured what hours of testimony have shown, that your father not only provides for you but teaches you through his example about generosity, responsibility, and love. Malik felt tears threatening but blinked them back. Under the table, Ava's small hand found his and squeezed. "Mrs. Jennings," the judge turned to Marla, "your concern for your granddaughter's welfare is understandable and comes from a place of love. However, the evidence shows Mr. Turner has created a stable, nurturing environment that goes beyond mere physical provision. He's building a legacy of service and compassion that will shape Ava's character for years to come." Marla dabbed at her eyes with a tissue, her shoulders dropping slightly as tension released. "The court finds no compelling reason to modify the current custody arrangement," Judge Martinez declared. "Mr. Turner will retain full custody of Ava Turner. Furthermore, I want to commend you, Mr. Turner, for showing that successful parenting isn't just about traditional metrics of stability. It's about modeling character, resilience, and community engagement for our children." The judge smiled, something rare in these chambers. "You've turned a shelter kitchen into a classroom of values for your daughter. That's the kind of innovative parenting we need more of, not less." She made a final note in her papers. "This hearing is adjourned." The sharp crack of the gavel made it official. Ava threw her arms around Malik's neck as he lifted her up, holding her close. Sister Alma wiped tears while beaming, and even Gus looked misty-eyed from his seat in the gallery. As people began filing out, Marla stood hesitantly by her chair, looking lost. Her attorney gathered papers, but she remained, watching Malik and Ava's embrace. Finally, she took a deep breath and crossed the aisle. "Malik," she said softly, her voice wavering. I need to explain." Malik set Ava down but kept hold of her hand, turning to face his mother-in-law. "I was so scared," Marla continued, wringing her hands. "After losing Sarah, I couldn't bear the thought of anything happening to Ava. When I heard about late nights at the shelter, the restaurant offer, all the changes." She shook her head. "I just wanted her safe. But I see now that safe doesn't always mean what I thought it did." Ava released Malik's hand and stepped forward to hug her grandmother's waist. Marla's composure cracked completely as she knelt to embrace her granddaughter properly. "I'm sorry," she whispered, looking up at Malik over Ava's shoulder. I was wrong to doubt you. Malik felt the last knot of tension in his chest dissolve. This woman had been Sarah's mother, had helped raise the woman he'd loved. Despite their differences, they shared the same fierce love for Ava. Your family, he said simply. We're all Ava has left of her mother. She needs both of us. Marla stood, wiping her eyes. I'd understand if you wanted space after all this. Actually, Malik said, surprising himself with the words that came next, I was hoping you'd join us for dinner this weekend. I'm testing some new recipes for the restaurant menu. Ava's been helping me perfect her mother's cornbread recipe. Really? Marla's face lit up with hope. Really? Malik nodded. Sunday at 6, you can tell me more stories about Sarah's childhood. Ava loves hearing those. I'd like that, Marla smiled, her first genuine smile in months. I'd like that very much. The morning sun streamed through the tall windows of Isabel's office, casting warm patches across the polished conference table. Malik sat beside her, still processing the stack of papers before them. The investors' new proposal wasn't just a reinstatement of funds, it was an expansion. They want to double the kitchen space? Malik asked, his voice quiet with disbelief. Isabel nodded, her eyes bright with excitement. Not just double, look at the blueprint. She spread out the large sheet, pointing to different sections. Here's the main restaurant kitchen, and here. She traced her finger to a separate area. This is the community kitchen space, fully licensed, fully equipped. Malik leaned forward, studying the detailed drawings. The community kitchen wasn't an afterthought tucked into a corner. It was a proper professional setup with its own entrance, prep stations, and storage. After that letter from the Michelin inspector went viral, Isabel continued, 3 more investors called. They don't just want to fund us, they want to be part of something meaningful. Tasha burst into the office, tablet in hand, her braids swinging with enthusiasm. The St. Bridget's Table hashtag is still trending. And look at these donation offers. She turned the screen toward them, showing a cascade of messages. Equipment suppliers want to contribute. There's a high-end range company offering to outfit both kitchens. Malik sat back, overwhelmed. Just weeks ago, he'd been serving cold sandwiches in a failing shelter kitchen. Now, it's not charity, Isabel said firmly, reading his expression. This is smart business. The community kitchen will run apprenticeship programs, catering services, cooking classes. It's sustainable. Sister Alma arrived next, bringing her practical wisdom to the meeting. She'd been instrumental in developing the training program structure. We've already got 10 shelter residents interested in the apprenticeships, she reported, settling into a chair. Gus is organizing a veterans cooking group. The meeting continued as they worked through logistics. The contractor would begin renovation work next week. The health department had fast-tracked their permits after the inspector's letter. Even Marla, Ava's grandmother, had called to offer her connections with local farmers for produce supply. Later that afternoon, Malik stood in the empty restaurant space, construction dust motes dancing in the sunlight. The demolition crew had cleared the interior, revealing the bones of what would become Maison Common. The old brick walls held a century of stories, and now they would hold new ones. He walked slowly through what would become the main dining room, his footsteps echoing. The space felt vast and full of possibility. A worker passed by with measuring tape, nodding respectfully. The constant tap-tap of hammers and whir of drills filled the air. Isabel joined him, hard hat in hand. "Let me show you something," she said, leading him toward the back. They passed through what would become the main kitchen, where plumbers were installing heavy-duty gas lines. "Here," she said, stopping in the community kitchen area. "This is your domain too." Malik ran his hand along a rough concrete wall, soon to be covered with gleaming stainless steel. Large windows would let in natural light. He could already picture students working at the stations, learning knife skills, building confidence. "We'll have sliding doors here," Isabel explained, gesturing to a space between the kitchens. "During service, we can open them up, make it one big kitchen family." A construction foreman approached with questions about electrical outlets. As Isabel stepped away to consult, Malik continued his slow circuit of the space. He paused at each window, imagining the scenes that would unfold: morning prep work with apprentices, afternoon cooking classes for kids, evening meals that would bring people together. The community kitchen had its own dedicated dining area, smaller than the main restaurant but warm and welcoming. He could already see Gus holding court at one of the tables, sharing stories with young veterans learning the trade. Sister Alma would bring her choir members for cooking demonstrations. There would be space for Ava to do her homework while he taught evening classes. Near the separate entrance, a wall had been marked for shelving. Resource Center, read the notation on the blueprint. They would stock it with cookbooks, nutritional information, and job training materials. The scale of it all was humbling. But it wasn't just about size, it was about possibility. Every detail had been planned to serve both excellence and accessibility. The kitchen equipment would be professional grade, but arranged to accommodate workers of different skill levels. The layout promoted both efficiency and teaching opportunities. A beam of sunlight broke through the dust, illuminating the space where the heart of the kitchen would be, the long line of ranges where people would learn to cook with confidence and pride. Malik stood there, letting the warmth wash over him, remembering all the kitchens that had shaped his journey. His mother's careful lessons at home, the culinary school where he'd faced discrimination, the shelter kitchen where he'd found his true calling. The sound of small footsteps pulled him from his thoughts. Ava had arrived with Sister Alma for her after-school visit. She ran to him, sketchbook clutched to her chest. "Daddy, can I show you my ideas for the kids' corner?" Malik lifted her up so she could see over the construction barriers. "Of course, baby. What are you thinking?" "We need a special table just the right height," she said seriously, "and hooks for aprons with their names on them." Isabel returned, smiling at Ava's enthusiasm. "Speaking of special touches," she said, "the sign maker wants to know if we're sure about the plaque wording." Malik nodded. The brass plaque that would hang by the host stand had been his idea: excellence with empathy. A loud crash from the main dining room made them all jump. Just a worker dropping some tools, but it broke the contemplative moment. The foreman was calling for Isabel again. There were more decisions to make, more details to coordinate. Malik set Ava down, watching her skip off to show Sister Alma her drawings. He took one more look around the community kitchen space, imagining the meals and moments that would fill it. Soon, these bare walls would echo with voices learning, teaching, sharing. Soon, this dream would become solid and real, built on something stronger than brick and steel, built on faith, hard work, and the power of breaking bread together. The renovation would take weeks yet, transforming this raw space into something remarkable. Malik walked slowly through the future heart of their community kitchen, each step carrying him closer to a vision he'd never dared to dream so big. The late afternoon sun painted golden stripes across Maison Common's freshly polished floors. Malik stood in the gleaming new kitchen, adjusting his crisp white chef's coat. The fabric felt strange after years of wearing a shelter apron, but Isabel had insisted on getting him the best. "Daddy!" Ava's voice rang out as she burst through the kitchen doors, her black party dress swishing. "Look what I made!" She held up a stack of hand-drawn menus, each one decorated with careful illustrations of the dishes. Malik knelt down to examine her work. She'd drawn little bowls of steaming gumbo, plates of cornbread, and what looked like Gus's field kit stew, complete with tiny vegetables floating in the broth. "These are beautiful, baby girl. Sister Alma helped me write all the words neat," Ava said proudly. "And look." She pointed to a small heart she'd drawn in the corner of each menu. "That's so people know the food is made with love." The kitchen staff moved around them, doing final prep work. The sound of chopping, sizzling, and quiet conversation filled the air. Isabel appeared, her own chef's coat pristine, her gray hair neatly pulled back. "Ah, our young artist," she smiled at Ava. "Those illustrations are exactly what we needed. Would you like to help hand them out to our guests? Ava nodded eagerly, clutching the menus to her chest. First seating is in 30 minutes, Isabel announced to the kitchen. Remember, we're running 2 services tonight, the main dining room and the community table. Every plate gets the same attention, no matter which menu it's from. Malik checked his station one last time. The ingredients for both menus were prepped and ready. Premium cuts next to humble vegetables, fancy garnishes beside simple herbs. On one side, the components for the prix fixe dishes waited in perfectly measured portions. On the other, the makings of the shelter supper menu stood proud, including Gus's field kit stew, made exactly the way the old veteran had taught him. The dining room doors opened at 6 sharp. Ava stood by the host stand, greeting each guest with a small curtsy as she handed them their illustrated menus. The room filled quickly. Wealthy patrons in fine clothes sat at white-clothed tables, while at the long community table, shelter residents and neighborhood families gathered. Gus arrived wearing a pressed shirt and his old service medals. Sister Alma came with several choir members. They took their places at the community table, beaming with pride. Tasha, the food blogger who'd helped spread word of the shelter pop-ups, sat nearby with her camera ready. Orders started flowing into the kitchen. Malik moved with practiced ease between his stations, plating both elegant prix fixe courses and generous portions of comfort food. Each dish left his hands with equal care, whether it was headed for a 200 tasting menu or the pay-what-you-can community table. The kitchen rhythm built steadily. Calls of, "Yes, chef," echoed as Malik and Isabel directed their team. Steam rose, pans sizzled, and the air filled with the mingled aromas of fine French technique and soul-warming home cooking. Halfway through service, Ava slipped into the kitchen. "Daddy, they love the menus, and Mr. Gus is telling everyone about his stew." Malik smiled, wiping his hands on his apron. "That's great, sweetheart. How about you go keep him company while I get his special dish ready?" As Ava skipped back to the dining room, Malik began plating the field kit stew. He ladled the rich broth, carefully arranging the tender vegetables and meat just as Gus had shown him. A sprig of fresh thyme, Gus's mother's secret ingredient, went on top. Isabel appeared at his side, inspecting the dish. "Beautiful," she said softly. "This is what real cooking looks like, history and heart on a plate." The dining room fell quiet as Malik emerged carrying the first bowl of stew. He placed it in front of Gus himself, letting the aromatic steam rise between them. Gus's eyes went wide as he took in the presentation, his humble army recipe elevated to restaurant quality while staying true to its roots. "Just like Mama's," Gus whispered, his voice rough with emotion. "No, maybe even better." The whole room burst into applause, fine diners and community guests alike. Malik squeezed Gus's shoulder before heading back to the kitchen, where more orders waited. Through the service window, he could see Ava bouncing excitedly beside Gus, pointing at her menu illustration of the stew, while the old veteran took his first appreciative spoonful. The dining room hummed with conversation as servers glided between tables, carrying steaming plates of Gus's field kit stew. At one table, a businessman in an expensive suit sat next to Mr. Thompson, a shelter regular known for his harmonica playing. They were deep in conversation about jazz, their different worlds bridged by the aromatic bowl before them. Ava moved from table to table, her black party dress twirling as she handed out her illustrated menus. Each drawing captured the essence of the dishes. Little boats of gumbo sailed across the paper, while stick-figure hands passed bread between smiling faces. The guests' eyes softened when they saw her artwork, the simple drawings telling the story of community better than any fancy typography could. In the kitchen, Malik worked with focused precision. His hands moved with practiced grace, plating each dish as if it were being served to family, because in many ways it was. The shelter residents, who'd been invited as guests of honor, carried themselves with quiet dignity, some wearing their Sunday best, others in clean but well-worn clothes. They all belonged here, just as Malik had promised them they would. Isabel orchestrated the kitchen with subtle gestures, her presence both commanding and nurturing. She'd insisted on working the line alongside Malik tonight, showing everyone that this partnership was real. When a plate wasn't quite perfect, she'd adjust it with the same care whether it was headed to a food critic or a shelter elder. Sister Alma stood at the pass, her usual practical outfit replaced by a simple black dress. She watched each plate with the same attention she gave to monitoring medication schedules at the shelter. Nothing escaped her notice. Not a wobbly sauce, not a guest waiting too long, not a server who needed an encouraging word. Table 7, 2 field, kit stews, 1 choir, cornbread, called out Tasha, who traded her camera for an apron tonight. She'd insisted on being part of the service team, saying she needed to experience the story from the inside. The Michelin inspector, now known to them as James, sat quietly at a corner table. He'd come as a regular guest this time, his notepad conspicuously absent. Instead, he simply ate, occasionally closing his eyes to savor a bite, nodding in quiet appreciation. Gus held court at a central table, surrounded by other veterans who'd been part of the shelter family. His eyes got misty when his namesake stew arrived. "Just like we dreamed it, chef," he called out to Malik. "Better than Mama's, and that's saying something." The restaurant buzzed with the kind of energy that couldn't be manufactured, the real warmth of community. Paying guests found themselves sharing stories with shelter residents, drawn into conversations about favorite meals and childhood memories. The barriers that usually divided people seemed to dissolve in the steam rising from their bowls. Marla sat with Ava at a small table near the kitchen, her earlier doubts visibly melting as she watched her granddaughter proudly explain each dish to nearby diners. The grandmother's face softened every time she heard Ava say, "My daddy made this with love." In the kitchen, Malik moved with quiet confidence between stations. This wasn't just dinner service. It was the fulfillment of a promise. Every plate that left his hands carried more than food. It carried dignity, respect, and the belief that everyone deserved to be served with excellence. The dinner service flowed smoothly, a dance of plates and people, of stories and sustenance. Then, at precisely 7 o'clock, Sister Alma approached the old brass bell that had been carefully transported from the shelter kitchen. It hung now in its new home, polished but still bearing its decades of patina. The dining room fell quiet as Sister Alma lifted the small hammer. Her voice, clear and strong, carried through the space. At Brigid's, this bell has always meant more than just dinner time. It means welcome. It means family. It means no one goes hungry for food or for kindness. She rang the bell 3 times, its familiar tone bringing tears to many eyes. "Service," she called out, just as she had thousands of times before at the shelter. "Service," the room responded in unison, shelter residents, paying guests, staff, and volunteers all joining in the chorus. Malik stepped out from the kitchen, wiping his hands on his apron. Isabel joined him, and together they looked out over the room, over their shared vision made real. She pulled 2 small glasses from behind her back and poured a splash of champagne in each. They found a quiet corner, away from the bustling service. No words were needed as they clinked their glasses softly. In that moment, excellence and empathy had found their perfect balance, just as the brass plaque by the host stand proclaimed. The dinner service continued around them, the room filled with the sounds of satisfaction, clinking forks, happy murmurs, and genuine laughter. Through the kitchen doors, Ava could be seen teaching the dessert chef how to draw her special menu icons, while Sister Alma directed traffic with her characteristic efficiency. Malik and Isabel stood in their corner, watching their 2 worlds blend into something new and beautiful. This wasn't just opening night, it was the first page of a story they would write together, 1 plate at a time. The porch light cast a gentle glow as Malik and Ava settled into their favorite spots on the worn wooden steps. The night air was cool and sweet, carrying the faint scent of jasmine from their neighbor's garden. Ava's party dress sparkled in the dim light as she leaned against her father's shoulder, her small frame still buzzing with the excitement of the evening. Malik reached into his chef's coat pocket and pulled out a napkin-wrapped bundle. The cloth was still warm, holding the last dinner roll he'd saved specially for this moment. His fingers were tired from hours of cooking, but they moved with tender care as he unwrapped their midnight snack. "You didn't eat much tonight," he said softly, breaking the roll in half. Steam rose between them, carrying the scent of butter and herbs. "Too busy being the best menu artist in town?" Ava giggled, accepting her portion. "I was watching everyone's faces when they tasted your food." She took a small bite, savoring it the way she'd seen the food critics do. They all looked like they were getting hugs from the inside out. Malik smiled, remembering the parade of expressions he'd glimpsed through the kitchen window: joy, surprise, nostalgia, comfort. He'd seen tears in Gus's eyes when the field kit stew was served, and watched Sister Alma press her hand to her heart at the first taste of her namesake cornbread. "Daddy." Ava's voice was thoughtful now, her legs swinging gently against the steps. "Are you happy now? Like, really happy?" Malik took a deep breath, considering her question with the seriousness it deserved. The stars were beginning to appear overhead, pinpricks of light in the darkening sky. He thought about the long journey that had brought them here, the broken stove, the custody battle, the nights of uncertainty. He remembered the weight of those moments, how they'd pressed against his chest like physical things. "You know how different foods taste different?" he asked, watching as Ava nodded. "Well, enough tastes different now." He brushed a crumb from her cheek. "It tastes like when you add just the right amount of salt to a dish, and suddenly all the flavors wake up and start singing together." "Is that why you saved this roll?" Ava held up her half, studying it in the porch light. "Because it tastes like happy?" "I saved it because sharing it with you makes everything taste better," Malik said, wrapping an arm around her shoulders. "Just like your mama always said, the secret ingredient is love." They fell quiet then, finishing their midnight snack as the crickets began their evening chorus. The neighborhood settled around them, porch lights clicking off one by one, but the warmth of the kitchen still lingered in their clothes and hair. It was the scent of success, of community, of promises kept. A shooting star streaked across the sky, and Ava pointed excitedly, nearly dropping her last bite of roll. Malik steadied her hand, remembering how her mother used to do the same thing, always the first to spot shooting stars, always ready with a wish. The stars multiplied above them, filling the velvet darkness with possibility. Neither spoke now, content to share this peaceful moment after such a momentous day. Ava's head grew heavy against Malik's shoulder, her breath slowing to match the rhythm of the night. The last crumbs of their shared roll sat in the napkin between them, a simple reminder of all they'd built together. They watched the stars in silence, father and daughter, their hearts full with the taste of enough. The morning sun streamed through Maison Common's windows, catching dust motes that danced above the freshly mopped floors. Malik stood at the prep station, his knife moving in a steady rhythm through a mountain of carrots. The familiar motion helped calm his racing thoughts after opening the letter that had arrived moments ago. The cream-colored envelope, with its distinctive red seal, sat on the corner of his station. Inside, typed in clean, professional letters, was the announcement that Maison Common was under consideration for a Bib Gourmand recognition from Michelin. Not a star something different, but just as meaningful. An honor given to restaurants that served exceptional food at moderate prices. Restaurants that made excellence accessible to everyone. Malik paused his chopping to wipe his brow with his sleeve. He picked up the letter one more time, reading it again just to be sure it was real. A small smile tugged at his lips as he thought about how far they'd come from those desperate days cooking on borrowed burners in the shelter parking lot. "Daddy!" Ava's voice rang out as she burst through the kitchen doors, her backpack bouncing. She'd started coming straight to the restaurant after school, doing homework at her special corner table before helping with the evening service. "What's that?" "Just a letter, baby," Malik said, carefully folding the paper and tucking it into his recipe notebook, the same worn leather book that held all his shelter recipes and the stories behind them. "Nothing as exciting as what you've got in that backpack. How was your math test?" Ava launched into a detailed description of her multiplication tables while Malik resumed his prep work. His hands never stopped moving as he listened, nodding at all the right moments. The vegetables for tonight's community meal wouldn't chop themselves. Sister Alma appeared in the doorway, clipboard in hand. "We've got extra guests tonight," she announced, her practical shoes squeaking on the tile. "The women's shelter downtown had a pipe burst. They're sending 20 more our way." "We'll make it work," Malik said, already mentally adjusting his portions. "Ava, want to help me count out more plates?" Together, they moved through their familiar routine. Ava knew exactly where everything was now, confidently pulling plates from the industrial shelves while telling her father about the story she'd written during creative writing class. It was about a chef who could make sunshine soup, she explained, and everyone who tasted it felt warm inside, even on the coldest days. The kitchen slowly filled with other staff members. Line cooks tied on aprons, prep cooks washed produce, and servers polished silverware. Through it all, delicious aromas began to build, onions caramelizing, stock simmering, fresh bread baking in the ovens. Isabel arrived for the evening service, her chef's whites pristine. She paused at Malik's station, raising an eyebrow at his recipe book where the corner of the Michelin letter peeked out. He gave a small nod, and her face lit up with a proud smile. "Tonight's menu?" she asked, moving smoothly to business. "Hearty vegetable soup with those beautiful carrots from the rooftop garden," Malik replied. "Herb-crusted chicken, roasted potatoes, and Gus's favorite greens. Simple food done right." "Perfect," Isabel said. She'd learned to trust Malik's instincts about what their varied guests needed. The paying customers who came for the regular dinner service would get the same meal as those who couldn't pay. That was their promise, their mission. Excellence served with dignity for everyone. As the afternoon wore on, Malik worked steadily, keeping one eye on Ava as she finished her homework and then began drawing her signature menu illustrations. Her colored pencils moved across paper with the same focus he gave to his knife work, creating cheerful pictures of carrots with smiling faces and dancing chickens. The dining room began to fill with their regular Tuesday crowd, elderly veterans who'd followed them from St. Bridget's, young families who loved their pay-what-you-can policy, business people who believed in their mission, and shelter residents who knew they'd always have a place at the table. Gus arrived early, as usual, taking his preferred seat near the kitchen where he could call out cooking advice that Malik pretended to need. "Smells like home in here, chef," he announced, making Ava giggle as she distributed her illustrated menus. Sister Alma moved through the dining room like a ship's captain, ensuring everything was in its place. She straightened tablecloths, adjusted flower arrangements, and greeted guests with her particular mix of warmth and efficiency. The brass plaque by the host stand caught the evening light. Excellence with empathy. In the kitchen, Malik did one final taste test of each dish. The soup was rich and warming, the chicken perfectly seasoned, the potatoes crisp on the outside and fluffy within. He nodded to himself, satisfied that every plate would carry not just sustenance, but respect to whoever received it. Ava appeared at his side, having changed into her junior server apron. "Ready, Daddy?" "Almost, baby." He ladled soup into bowls, each portion generous and steaming. The chicken was sliced and arranged, the potatoes nestled alongside, the greens bright and inviting. Everything had to be just right, not because of any possible Michelin recognition, but because every guest deserved their best effort. Sister Alma appeared in the kitchen doorway, her face glowing with pride as she surveyed the scene, Malik and his daughter standing side by side, ready to serve. Isabel directing her staff with quiet confidence, the kitchen humming with purposeful energy. She reached for the brass bell that had followed them from St. Bridget's to their new home. The clear, bright note rang out, "Service." What would you do if you were in their place? Comment your answer below, and let's see how you'd rewrite the ending. If you thought this was just the beginning, you're right. Click through and see where the story takes you next. If you enjoyed the story of Malik Turner, I handpicked the next story that you will enjoy. Please don't miss this one. Click here to watch it.